Welcome, everyone. I'm Dusky Nights, and before we begin, I'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from, and what time is it for you? Drop a comment below. Also, I want to know what kind of stories you enjoy, and make sure to listen till the end. The roses were pretty, a Valentine's Day gift from my husband, but they smelled off, and the thorns, they were really sharp. The red flowers opened up in the glass vase. They looked so nice in our living room. My husband David gave them to me this morning. It was a nice surprise. He doesn't usually do stuff like that. He said, "Happy Valentine's Day, Sarah." His voice sounded a little strange. He kissed me quickly on the cheek and then left for work. Now, I'm looking at the flowers and I feel a little weird. It's not just that things have been awkward between David and me lately. It's the smell of the roses. They smell sweet, like flowers usually do. But there's another smell too. It's kind of sharp and almost like blood. I smell them again. It's hard to smell, but it's there. And the thorns, they're super long and pointy, like little knives. I reach out to touch a flower, but I'm careful not to poke myself. I barely touch a petal, and I already get a tiny cut. A little bit of blood comes out. I don't like these roses. David and I have been married for 10 years. We were together since high school. Everyone thought we had the perfect love story. But lately, things have been bad. We don't feel close anymore. David has been acting distant. He works a lot and comes home late. He always looks tired. We don't talk much. It feels like we're not even together anymore. I've tried to make things better, but he doesn't seem to care. I feel like I'm losing him, and I don't know what to do. These roses, this big romantic thing, feels fake, like he's trying to make up for something. But what? I keep thinking that something is wrong. Something bad is happening in our lives. That night, David came home late like always. He seemed worried. He didn't even really look at the roses. We ate dinner without talking much. It was uncomfortable. After dinner, he went to his office and closed the door. I stayed in the living room staring at the roses. The smell was stronger now, and I think I saw a dark spot on one of the stems, hidden by the thorns. I decided to go to bed. I hoped I could forget the bad feeling in my stomach. When I was in bed, I heard David in his office. He was talking to someone. I couldn't hear what he said very well. I only heard a few words. "It's done. No one will know. I took care of it." I got scared. What was he talking about? What did he do? I got out of bed and went to his office door. My heart was beating fast. I listened at the door, but all I heard was David talking quietly. I went back to bed, but I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the roses, the smell, and David's strange behavior. It felt like something was going to happen, something bad. The next morning, David was gone. He left a note in the kitchen. Had to go out of town. Back soon. That's all it said. I got angry and scared. He was avoiding me. He was hiding something. I went to the living room and looked at the roses. They smelled awful, like flowers and something rotten mixed together. The frost was everywhere, on the table, the vase, even the flowers. They didn't look pretty anymore. They looked gross. Then I saw something, a small, dark thing hidden in the thorns. I carefully reached for it. It was a key, an old, dirty key. It was heavy and cold, and it had a picture on it, a rose with blood dripping from the petals. I knew I had to find out what David was hiding. The key, it was a clue. It would show me something bad. I looked around the living room. Where could it go? Nothing in here was locked. My eyes went back to the roses. They looked even worse now. The brown spots were bigger, and the frost was thicker. It was like they were dying, fast. I remembered the attic. We used to store old things up there, things we didn't want to throw away, but didn't use anymore either. Maybe the key went to something up there. The attic was dusty and dark. I pulled the string for the light, and a single bulb flickered on. It wasn't much, but it was enough to see. Old furniture was covered in sheets, like ghosts. Boxes were stacked in the corners. It smelled like old paper and mothballs. I started searching. I looked in drawers, under furniture, inside boxes. Nothing. I was getting frustrated. The roses were still on my mind. They were dying. And I had this feeling that the key was important, that it had something to do with David and with why he was acting so strange. Then I saw it. A small wooden chest tucked away in a dark corner. It was old, the wood scratched and faded. It looked like it hadn't been opened in years. I walked over to it, my heart pounding. This was it. I could feel it. I tried the key, and it slid right in. I turned it, and the lock clicked open. I lifted the lid slowly, careful not to make a sound. Inside the chest, there were more roses, dried roses. They were brown and brittle, like they had been dead for a long time. And mixed in with the dried roses, there were photographs. I picked up a photo. It was of David. He was younger, maybe in his early 20s. He was with a woman. She was beautiful, with long, dark hair. They were smiling, holding hands. They looked happy. I flipped the photo over. On the back, someone had written, "Forever." I felt a pang of jealousy. Who was this woman? Was she someone David had been with before me? Was this why he'd been acting so strangely? I picked up another photo. It was the same woman, but this time she was alone. She was sitting on a bench, crying. I flipped it over. Broken Promises was written on the back. I kept looking through the photos. They told a story of love, loss, and betrayal. The woman in the photos was someone David had been deeply in love with, but something had happened, something bad, and it had ended badly. Then I found a photo that made my blood run cold. It was the same woman, but she was lying on the ground. Her eyes were closed. There was blood on her face. I flipped the photo over. There was nothing written on the back. I dropped the photo, my hands shaking. I knew then. David had killed her. He had killed the woman he loved. And the roses, they weren't just a Valentine's Day gift. They were a message from him, a message from a killer. I heard a noise downstairs. The front door. David was home. I knew I had to get out of there. I had to call the police. But as I turned to leave the attic, I saw him standing in the doorway. He was holding a single red rose, and his eyes, they were empty. "You found my little secret," he said, his voice soft, almost gentle. "Happy Valentine's Day, Sarah." My name is Damien, and I'm 40 years old, living in the quiet suburbs of Portland now. But the nightmare I'm about to recount began on Halloween night, 2003. I was 16, living in a small, isolated town nestled in the Colorado Rockies, and like many teenagers, I was dabbling in things I didn't fully understand. I drifted away from the church I grew up in, searching for something to fill the spiritual void I felt. Witchcraft, with its air of mystery and forbidden knowledge, seemed powerful. It started innocently enough. My older brother, Caleb, and I found an antique mirror in a dusty old shop downtown. It was ornate, with a heavy, tarnished silver frame, and it seemed to hum with a strange energy. We thought it would be a cool prop for the Halloween party Caleb was throwing at his house. His wife, Lena, their 3-year-old daughter, Lily, and I were there, setting up when the guests started arriving. Someone mentioned my interest in the occult, and soon a small group had gathered around me, curious. I showed off some tarot readings, and they were impressed, a little spooked. Then someone asked if I'd ever used a Ouija board. I hadn't, but the idea sparked something in me. Caleb was intrigued too, so we decided to give it a try. After the guests arrived, the party was in full swing, but later, after most had gone home, a smaller group of us, including Lena and a few close friends, found ourselves drawn back to the mirror. We dimmed the lights, gathered in the living room, and placed our fingers on the planchette. At first, nothing happened. We laughed nervously, attributing it to our own self-consciousness. But then the planchette began to move, slowly at first. Then, with increasing speed, it spelled out a single, chilling word. Leave. A wave of icy air seemed to sweep through the room. Everyone scattered, a mixture of fear and nervous excitement on their faces. Caleb, though shaken, insisted he hadn't moved the planchette, and I knew I hadn't either. Still, I tried to brush it off. It was just a silly game, right? After everyone had finally left, I stayed up to help Lena clean. Caleb had gone to bed, exhausted. As I offered to take the trash out to the detached garage, a shiver ran down my spine. The moment I stepped inside the garage, I felt it, a suffocating presence, as though I was being watched by something unseen. The air grew heavy, and a strange, metallic scent filled my nostrils. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was just my imagination running wild. But when I turned to leave, I saw it, standing in the shadows, just beyond the reach of the dim light, was a figure, pale, almost translucent, with no discernible features. It didn't move, didn't speak, it just was, and it was staring at me. Terror seized me. I slammed the garage door shut and ran back to the house, my heart pounding in my chest. I woke Caleb and begged him to go back to the garage with me. He grabbed his flashlight, a look of concern on his face. Together we cautiously made our way back to the garage, but the figure was gone. Caleb, though skeptical, could see the genuine fear in my eyes. He remembered stories I'd told him about dreams I had that had later come true. He trusted my instincts, even if he didn't fully understand them. We decided to take the mirror back to my place, thinking it would be safer there. The next few days were filled with a growing sense of dread. Strange things began happening at my house. I'd hear whispers in my room at night. Just at the edge of hearing, my mom started waking up with unexplained bruises on her arms. The antique mirror seemed to radiate a coldness, a malevolent energy. I knew deep down that the mirror was the source of the disturbances. One night, I decided to try communicating through the mirror. I lit a candle in my room, the flickering flame casting eerie shadows on the walls, and stared into the depths of the glass, asking questions into the empty space. Suddenly, the candle flame leaped high, almost touching the ceiling, and a low, guttural growl filled the room. The air grew thick and heavy, and an overwhelming sense of evil washed over me. That was the final straw. I called Caleb, my voice trembling with fear, and begged him to come over. We had to get rid of the mirror. Together, we wrapped the mirror in a thick blanket and carried it out to the woods behind my house. We dug a deep hole and buried it, hoping to seal the evil away. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. A few days later, my friend Kevin called. He'd seen us bury the mirror and, out of morbid curiosity, had dug it up. He told me it was perfectly intact, despite the blanket we'd wrapped it in. He was laughing, almost hysterical. "Why did you bury a perfectly good antique mirror?" he asked. I told him it was cursed, that he had to get rid of it. But Kevin, ever the skeptic, didn't listen. A month later, I received a call. Kevin's mother had died in a tragic accident, falling down a flight of stairs. Not long after, Kevin took his own life. I knew with chilling certainty that the mirror was responsible. Back at my house, the disturbances escalated. The whispers became clearer, more distinct, sometimes even calling my name. The bruises on my mom's arms became more frequent, more severe. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. Every night, I felt like I was being watched, a constant, oppressive feeling. One night, I woke up to find the pale, faceless figure standing at the foot of my bed. It didn't move, didn't speak. It just stood there, watching me, its presence radiating a chilling malevolence. I stopped practicing witchcraft after that, the fear too intense, too real. But the damage had been done. Years passed. My parents divorced. I moved away, trying to escape the memories, the fear. But the past has a way of catching up. It's been 10 years, and I still see the figure in my nightmares. I still hear the whispers, and I know deep down that it's only a matter of time before it comes for me again. The card was simple, a Valentine's Day message from a secret admirer, but the words, they were too familiar, and the symbol, it was too disturbing. The postman had left it on the counter, tucked between a bill and a junk mail flyer. Just a small, white envelope. I, Ava, age 27, owner of the Book Nook, almost tossed it aside, thinking it was just another advertisement. But then I saw my name, written in elegant calligraphy, a Valentine's Day card. I frowned. I wasn't expecting anything. I hadn't been on a date in months. Not since, well, since him. My hand trembled slightly as I picked up the envelope. Inside, a simple card, pale pink, with a single red rose printed on the front. I opened it. The message was short, handwritten in neat, precise letters. "I've been watching you, Ava. You're not as alone as you think." A chill ran down my spine. It wasn't a romantic message. It was creepy. And the words, they were too familiar. I racked my brain, trying to place them. Had someone said this to me before? Was it from a book? I couldn't quite remember, but the feeling of unease settled deep in my gut. It felt like a threat, disguised as a Valentine's Day greeting. And then I saw the symbol. It was small, almost hidden at the bottom of the card, beneath the printed rose, a circle with a stylized A inside. It was a simple symbol, but it made my blood run cold. I knew it. I knew it from somewhere. But where? My mind flashed back, images flickering like a broken film reel. A dark room, a whispered voice, a hand reaching out. I pushed the memories away, trying to focus on the present. It was just a card, I told myself. Just a silly Valentine's Day joke. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. I own a small bookstore in the heart of the city. It's my sanctuary, a place where I feel safe and surrounded by stories. But lately, even here, I've been feeling watched, like someone is always just outside the window, observing me. I'd dismissed it as paranoia, the lingering effects of what happened before. He had said those words years ago. I've been watching you, Ava. He'd been obsessed with me, a dark, possessive force in my life. I had finally escaped him, but the fear, it never really went away. It was always there, lurking in the shadows of my mind. Now, this card, the familiar words, the disturbing symbol, it felt like he was back, but that was impossible. He was gone. He was dead, wasn't he? I spent the rest of the day on edge, jumping at every sound. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see him standing there, watching me. But there was no one, just my imagination playing tricks on me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the card, about the message, about the symbol. I tossed and turned, my mind racing with unanswered questions. Who had sent it? What did it mean? And why did it feel so familiar? I finally fell asleep, but my dreams were filled with darkness and whispers. I saw his face, his eyes burning into me. I've been watching you, Ava, he whispered. You can't hide from me. I woke up with a start, my heart pounding in my chest. The room was dark and silent, but I could still hear his voice echoing in my mind. I got out of bed and went to the window, peering out into the street. Nothing, just the empty streetlights and the shadows. I went back to bed, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, waiting for something to happen, waiting for him to come back. The next morning, I went to the bookstore. but I couldn't focus on my work. I kept thinking about the card, about the message, about the symbol. I tried to remember where I'd seen it before, but it was like a piece of my memory was missing. Then, as I was shelving books, I saw it. A book on symbolism. I picked it up, my hands trembling. I flipped through the pages, searching for the symbol that had haunted my dreams. And then I found it. It was an ancient symbol used by a secret society. It was said to represent obsession and control. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just a Valentine's Day joke. This was a message from someone who knew about my past, someone who was watching me, someone who wanted to control me. But who? Who could it be? He was dead. He had to be. Or was he? I looked around the bookstore, my eyes searching the shadows. I felt a prickling sensation on the back of my neck. Someone was here. Someone was watching me. I could feel it. And then I saw it. A figure standing in the doorway, hidden in the shadows. He was holding a single red rose, and he was smiling. "Happy Valentine's Day, Ava," he whispered. The party was supposed to be fun, a Valentine's Day celebration with friends, but the music, it was too loud, and the masks, they were too creepy. The bass throbbed through the floor, vibrating up through my shoes and into my bones. It was so loud, I could barely hear myself think, let alone talk to anyone. I glanced around the crowded living room. Red and pink decorations were everywhere. Streamers hanging from the ceiling, heart-shaped balloons bobbing near the lights. It was supposed to be a fun Valentine's Day party, a chance to relax and celebrate with our friends. But something felt off. Maybe it was the masks. Everyone was wearing them, as requested by the host, Liam. He'd said it would add a touch of mystery, make things more interesting. But in the dim light, the masks looked less mysterious and more creepy. Some were elaborate, feathered, and sequined. Others were simple, just a piece of cardboard with eye holes. But they all hid faces, making it hard to tell who was who. I spotted Chloe across the room, her bright red dress a stark contrast to the dark masks and shadows. She was talking to Ben, but I couldn't hear what they were saying over the music. I waved, but she didn't see me. Or maybe she did, and just didn't acknowledge me. I frowned. Chloe had been acting weird lately, ever since she started dating Liam. She was always distant, like she was keeping a secret. Our group of friends, Chloe, Ben, Emily, Josh, Sarah, and me, Olivia, had been close since high school. We'd been through everything together, graduations, breakups, bad haircuts. But lately, I felt like we were drifting apart. Liam with his charm and easy smile had inserted himself into our group a couple of years ago, and things had slowly started to change. I took a sip of my drink, a sickly sweet punch that tasted vaguely of cherries and regret. I wasn't really in the mood for a party. I'd been feeling anxious all day, a sense of unease that I couldn't shake. It was probably just the stress of work. I'm a nurse at the local hospital, and things had been crazy lately. But it felt like more than that. It felt like something was about to happen. The music shifted, a slow, eerie melody replacing the upbeat dance track. People started to pair up, moving to the makeshift dance floor in the center of the room. I saw Chloe and Liam dancing close together, their masks almost touching. Chloe looked pale, her eyes wide and shadowed, even behind her mask. Liam's hand was on her back, his fingers digging into her skin. He was whispering something in her ear, and she flinched. I felt a prickle of unease. Something was definitely wrong. I tried to catch Chloe's eye again, but she wouldn't look at me. She seemed trapped, like she couldn't get away from Liam. I decided to go outside for some fresh air. The backyard was dark and quiet, a welcome relief from the noise and the crowded living room. A few people were scattered around the patio, talking in hushed voices. I saw Ben sitting alone on a swing, his head in his hands. I walked over to him. "Hey," I said. "Everything okay?" He looked up, startled. He was wearing a simple black mask, and I could barely see his eyes in the darkness. "Yeah, just thinking," he mumbled. "About?" I asked. He hesitated for a moment, then said, "Chloe, she's been acting weird. I'm worried about her." "Me too," I said. "I think something's going on between her and Liam." Ben nodded. "I think so too. I saw them earlier. They were arguing. Liam was yelling at her." My stomach churned. "What about?" "I don't know," Ben said. "But it wasn't good." Chloe looked terrified. We were silent for a moment, both of us staring out into the darkness. Then I heard a scream. It was Chloe. We jumped up and ran back inside. The music had stopped, and the living room was silent. People were milling around, their masks adding to the confusion. I saw Liam standing in the corner, his mask tilted slightly. He was holding something in his hand, something shiny and metallic. "What happened?" I asked, my voice trembling. No one answered. Then I saw Chloe. She was lying on the floor, her red dress stained with blood. Her mask was gone, and her eyes were wide open, staring blankly at the ceiling. Liam stepped forward, his eyes glinting in the dim light. He was still holding the shiny object. It was a knife. "It was an accident," he said, his voice flat, motionless. She tripped. No one believed him. We all knew the truth. Liam had killed her. And the masks, they hadn't just added mystery to the party. They'd provided cover. They'd allowed him to hide in plain sight, to commit a horrific act, and then blend back into the crowd. The police arrived, and the living room became a chaotic scene of flashing lights and shouting voices. Liam was taken away in handcuffs, his mask finally removed, revealing a face contorted with rage. I looked at Chloe's body, lying on the floor, her life extinguished in an instant. I thought about the argument I'd overheard, the fear in her eyes. I realized then that the party hadn't just been a celebration. It had been a trap, and we'd all been caught in it. What was Liam's motive? Had he planned this all along? And why did Chloe seem so afraid? Share your theories in the comments below. It all started as an ordinary summer, the kind where the oppressive heat drives every parent to desperately search for ways to keep their kids entertained. I'd been taking my two boys to the community center for about a year, mostly for the air-conditioned gym and the occasional swim. This year, however, they had added something new, an indoor water park, 2 massive pools, twisting water slides, and playful fountains, all bathed in the bright sunlight, filtering through a high glass ceiling. My kids were instantly hooked, and just like that, our summer break revolved around this place. It was a welcome escape from the heat, and honestly, a bit of a break for me too. The setup was perfect, or so I thought. I would settle into a shaded seating area near the corner, usually with a book in hand, while the boys splashed and shrieked their way through the day. Most parents kept to themselves, offering the occasional weary nod of acknowledgement. The lifeguards patrolled the area, some more engaged than others, but it was clear this wasn't anyone's first rodeo. It felt safe, predictable, even relaxing. Little did I know, my summer was about to take a dark, romantic, and terrifying turn. About a week into our regular visits, I started noticing him, not a lifeguard, but a man. He was always there, sitting a few rows behind me, alone. He was attractive, in a quiet, intense way, with dark hair and piercing blue eyes. He always seemed to be watching me, not in a creepy way, but observing. I'd catch his eye sometimes, and he'd offer a small, shy smile. I found myself looking forward to seeing him, wondering what book he was reading, imagining conversations we might have. It was a silly crush, I knew, but it was a welcome distraction from the monotony of my days. Then, one sweltering afternoon, he approached. "Hi," he said, his voice surprisingly warm. "I'm John. I've noticed you here a few times. I hope this isn't too forward, but I was wondering if you'd like to grab a coffee sometime." I was flustered, caught off guard. "I'm Sophia," I replied, feeling a blush creep up my neck. "And yes, I'd love to." We chatted for a few minutes, and he asked for my number. I gave it to him, feeling a thrill of excitement. It had been a long time since I'd felt this spark. Our first date was a week later. It was perfect. We talked for hours, discovering shared interests and a similar sense of humor. He was charming, intelligent, and genuinely interested in what I had to say. I was falling for him, hard and fast. The water park became our special place. We'd meet there most days, me watching my kids, him watching me, that shy smile always present. He even started bringing me little gifts, a flower he'd picked from his garden, a bookmark with a quote from my favorite book. It was all so romantic. Then the strange thing started happening. It began subtly. I'd catch John staring at me with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. He'd sometimes say things that didn't quite make sense, like he knew things about me he couldn't possibly know. One day, he gave me a beautiful antique locket. "It belonged to my grandmother," he said. "I thought you'd like it." When I opened it, there was a picture inside of me. It was a picture taken at the water park just a few days before. I hadn't even noticed him taking it. I felt a chill run down my spine. The next day, I decided to talk to him about it. I met him at the water park, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and anger. "John," I said, "the picture, how did you get it?" He just smiled, a slow, unsettling smile. "I told you," he said. "It belonged to my grandmother." His voice was different, colder. "She's always watching." I backed away from him, my eyes wide with fear. "Who are you?" I whispered. He laughed, a low, chilling sound. "I'm the one you've been waiting for, Sophia," he said. "You're Valentine." And then the water in the pool behind him began to bubble and churn. A dark figure rose from the depths, its eyes glowing red. It reached out for me, its touch like ice. I screamed, a raw, terrified sound. John was gone. The figure was all that remained. It pulled me into the water, into the darkness. I woke up gasping for air, my heart pounding. I was in my bed, the sun streaming through the window. It was just a dream, I told myself. Just a terrible, terrifying dream. But as I got out of bed, I noticed something on my nightstand, the antique locket, and inside the picture of me at the water park. Just a few days before, I knew then that it wasn't a dream. It was a warning. And I knew that John, or whatever he was, would be back. He was my Valentine, after all. And he wouldn't let me go. He promised it would be a Valentine's Day reunion I'd never forget. He was right. I'll never forget the screams. Elara hadn't seen most of them in 10 years, not since that night. The fire, the screams, the way their youthful laughter had curdled into terror in a heartbeat. It had scattered them like leaves in a violent storm, each blown to a different corner of the country, carrying the unspoken weight of what they'd witnessed. Now, a decade later, Liam was bringing them back together. "It'll be good for us," his email had said, a chillingly optimistic tone. "A chance to heal, to remember." Elara had almost deleted it. The memories were a festering wound, constantly threatening to rip open and bleed anew. But a morbid curiosity, a dark fascination with the macabre, had won out. She needed to know if they were all as broken, as haunted as she was. The reunion was being held at a remote cabin nestled deep in the Catskill Mountains. It was picturesque in the photos Liam had attached, all rustic charm and snow-laden pines, a picture-perfect winter wonderland. But as Elara's car climbed the winding mountain road, a gnawing unease settled in her stomach. The isolation was palpable, the silence broken only by the rhythmic crunch of her tires on the fresh snow. The air itself felt heavy, pregnant with unspoken dread. The cabin, when she finally reached it, was even more secluded than she'd imagined, tucked away in a dense thicket of trees, far from any sign of civilization. As she parked and stepped out into the biting cold, Elara couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, the unsettling sensation of unseen eyes boring into her. Inside, the cabin was deceptively warm and inviting. A crackling fire blazed in the hearth, casting dancing shadows on the rough-hewn walls. The others were already there: Ben, Chloe, Emily, and Josh. They greeted Elara with forced smiles and hesitant hugs, the years of separation evident in their awkward movements and strained expressions. The air was thick with unspoken words, the shared trauma of that night hanging heavy between them like a shroud. As they settled in, the forced pleasantries quickly gave way to a palpable tension. Ben, always the class clown, tried to lighten the mood with jokes, but his laughter sounded hollow, echoing unnaturally in the quiet cabin. Chloe, once so vibrant and carefree, was withdrawn and unusually quiet, her eyes haunted by a lingering sadness, a constant reminder of the horrors they'd endured. Emily, and Josh, who had been inseparable in college, barely spoke to each other, their shared pain creating an unbridgeable chasm between them. As the night deepened, the atmosphere grew increasingly oppressive. The forced conversation dwindled, replaced by long, uncomfortable silences punctuated by the crackling fire and the howling wind outside. Alara found herself staring at the others, searching for any flicker of the vibrant, carefree friends they once were. But all she saw were hollow shells, haunted reflections of the people they used to be, their youthful innocence irrevocably shattered. Then the strange occurrences began. A floorboard creaked upstairs when no one was there. A flickering light in the hallway cast long, grotesque shadows that danced on the walls like mocking spirits. A gust of wind seemed to carry a faint, chilling whisper, a sound that made the hair on the back of Ilara's neck stand on end. They tried to dismiss it, attributing it to the age of the house and their overwrought nerves. But the feeling of being watched intensified, a cold prickle crawling across Ilara's skin. The fire in the hearth seemed to flicker and dim, as if responding to some unseen presence. The truth, or at least a version of it, came out in the dead of night, fueled by too much wine and long-buried resentments. It was Chloe, her voice trembling and laced with a desperate kind of hysteria, who finally broke the suffocating silence. She recounted the events of that terrible night, the fire, the screams, the way Liam had stood there, a detached observer amidst the chaos, watching them with cold, unseeing eyes. He had been the one, she insisted, the one who had deliberately started the fire, the one who had reveled in their terror, feeding off their fear. But they had all made a pact, a desperate, self-serving attempt to protect themselves, to bury the horrifying truth and try to move on with their shattered lives. Now, Liam was back, his motives shrouded in unsettling ambiguity, bringing them all together to relive the nightmare, to finally expose the dark, twisted secret they had all tried so desperately to forget. As Chloe spoke, the wind outside intensified, howling like a banshee, clawing at the windows as if trying to get in. The lights flickered violently and then plunged the cabin into complete, suffocating darkness. A blood-curdling scream, raw and primal, echoed through the night, followed by the sickening thud of a body hitting the floor. Then an unnerving silence descended, broken only by the relentless wind and the crackling embers in the fireplace. In the morning, the pristine snow outside was undisturbed, unmarked by any footprints. The cabin door stood ajar, swinging gently in the wind, Inside they found 5 empty glasses of wine by the cold hearth, a single crimson-red rose lying on the floor, its petals slightly crushed. Liam was nowhere to be found. Had he escaped? Or was he still there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for his next victim? The chilling question hung in the air, a silent testament to the horror of the Valentine's Day reunion. The heart-shaped box arrived on Valentine's Day morning. It wasn't the chocolates inside that made my blood run cold. It was the note. I, Isabel, 28, a freelance graphic designer, was working from home when the doorbell rang. Valentine's Day, a day I usually ignored. Since him, holidays lost their sparkle. I opened the door to a delivery man with a large, heart-shaped box, pink paper, satin ribbon, artificial red roses. "Isabel Moreau?" he asked. I nodded. "Happy Valentine's Day," he said too brightly. Inside, heart-shaped chocolates, too perfect. I picked one up, sniffing it. Almonds, or something metallic. Unease settled in. The card read, "Happy Valentine's Day, Isabel. I've been watching you. You're even more beautiful than I remember." Remember? Who was this? It felt like a violation. I thought of Daniel. Charming, then possessive. He'd stalked me after I broke up with him. I'd moved, changed my number, but the fear never left. This box felt like he was back, but he was gone, wasn't he? I called the police. Probably a prank, they said. I felt more anxious. It felt personal. That night, I couldn't sleep, thinking about the card, the chocolates. I dreamt of Daniel, his eyes burning. "I've been watching you, Isabel," he whispered. "You can't hide from me." I woke up, heart pounding. I felt watched. The next morning, I checked the box. The chocolates were gone. Another card. "You're mine, Isabel. Forever." A dark stain on the tissue paper. Blood. This wasn't a prank. It was a threat. Daniel was back. I knew I was in danger. I looked around my apartment, searching the shadows. I felt watched. The feeling was overwhelming. I had to do something. I couldn't just wait. I grabbed my phone, intending to call the police again, but my hand froze. What if he was watching me right now? What if calling them alerted him? I needed proof. I needed to know for sure. I decided to check my security camera footage. I'd installed a camera after the incident with Daniel, a measure of safety that had become a habit. I opened the app on my phone, my fingers trembling. The footage loaded slowly, agonizingly. And there he was, on my doorstep, just this morning. Daniel. He hadn't aged a day. He was smiling, holding the heart-shaped box. My blood ran cold. He was back. The fear was paralyzing, but I knew I had to act. I couldn't stay here, a sitting duck. I grabbed my keys and purse, intending to flee, but then I stopped. Running wouldn't solve anything. He knew where I lived. He'd find me again. I had to confront him. I had to face my fear. I grabbed a heavy kitchen knife, my hand shaking. I knew I couldn't fight him. Not really. But I could defend myself. I opened the door, stepping out into the hallway. He was there, at the end of the hall, leaning against the wall, a single red rose in his hand. He smiled, a chillingly familiar smile. "Happy Valentine's Day, Isabel," he said, his voice soft, almost gentle. "I told you I'd find you." He lunged. I screamed, raising the knife. He grabbed my wrist, twisting it painfully. The knife clattered to the floor. He laughed, a cold, triumphant sound. "You can't escape me, Isabel," he said. He pulled me close, his breath hot on my face. "You're mine now, forever." And then everything went black. Isabel never reappeared. Her neighbors reported a disturbance, and the police found her apartment empty, save for a single heart-shaped box, a red rose, and a lingering scent of his familiar cologne. Daniel was never found. Some say he's still out there, watching, waiting for his next Valentine's Day delivery. He told me it was a game, a Valentine's Day surprise, but the blindfold, it was too tight, and the basement, it was too cold. I, Sarah, age 20, a college sophomore studying psychology, giggled as Mark tied the blindfold. "Come on, you're making it too tight," I complained, though secretly thrilled. It was our first Valentine's Day, and he'd promised something special. He'd swept me off my feet with charm and attention, everything I thought I wanted. "Just a little tighter," he murmured, his breath on my cheek. He smelled of woodsy cologne. The knot tightened, and darkness engulfed me. "Okay, where are we going?" I asked, a mix of excitement and nerves. "That's a secret," he said, hand on my back, guiding me out of the dorm. I heard other students laughing, a stark contrast to our quiet bubble. He helped me into his sleek black sedan. Leather seats, his aftershave. The engine purred. "Are we going far?" I asked, trying to hide my nervousness. "Not too far," he replied. "Just a short drive." The drive felt endless. I tried to relax, focus on the surprise, but a nagging feeling persisted. I thought of Mark, how much I liked him, how lucky I was. But a small voice whispered doubts. Finally, the car stopped. Gravel crunched. "We're here," Mark said, too enthusiastically. He helped me out. The air was cold, damp. I smelled earth, wet leaves, dirt, like a basement. "Where are we?" I asked, my heart pounding. "Just wait and see," he said, leading me. We walked, the ground uneven. I heard dripping water. Then he stopped. "Okay," he said. "We're here." The blindfold came off, and I blinked in the dim light. A small, damp basement. Concrete walls, low ceiling. A single bulb cast eerie shadows. A table in the center. A single red rose in a vase. "Happy Valentine's Day," Mark said, smiling. I forced a smile. "This is nice," I said, unconvincingly. The basement was too cold. The rose felt out of place. "I have another surprise," Mark said, eyes glinting. He pulled out a small box, revealing a silver necklace, a delicate heart pendant. "It's lovely," I said, my voice shaky. He clasped it around my neck, his fingers brushing my skin, sending a shiver down my spine. "There's one more thing," he murmured. He pulled out handcuffs. My breath hitched. "What are those for?" I whispered. He smiled, a slow, predatory smile. "It's part of the game," he said. He grabbed my wrist, the metal cold against my skin. He did the same to the other. I tried to pull away, but it was too late. I was trapped. "What's going on?" I asked, trembling. "You're going to learn a lesson," he said, smile widening. "You're going to learn what it means to be mine." He pulled me close, his grip tight, his breath on my face, his aftershave now cloying. He kissed me, hard and possessive, sending a wave of fear through me. This wasn't the Mark I knew. This was someone else, someone dark, someone dangerous. He pulled away, eyes burning into mine. "Happy Valentine's Day, Sarah," he whispered. "Now the game begins." The game was subtle at first, verbal taunts laced with cruel affection. He'd tell me I was beautiful, how much he loved me, then criticize my clothes, hair, friends. He isolated me, insisting I spend all my time with him. He controlled everything, from what I wore to who I talked to. The basement became my prison, a cold, damp cage. The red rose withered, a grim reflection of my fading hope. Days blurred into nights, marked only by his presence and his increasingly erratic behavior. He'd shower me with affection one moment, then unleash his rage the next. I learned to walk on eggshells, to anticipate his every whim, to avoid his anger. Fear was constant, a gnawing presence. I was trapped, physically and emotionally, bound by the handcuffs and his control. One night, he came into the basement, eyes burning. He held a small, leather-bound book. "I have a surprise," he said, voice trembling with excitement. He forced me to sit at the table and opened the book. Pictures of me. Pictures he'd taken without me knowing, sleeping, showering, changing. My stomach churned. He'd been watching me, stalking me. I felt violated, exposed, helpless. He started reading, voice a low, menacing drone. He'd written about me, my body, my life, described my every move, every thought, every feeling. He was inside my head, inside my skin. He knew me better than I knew myself. The words were intimate, disturbing, a chilling testament to his obsession. His grip tightened, fingers digging into my flesh. I tried to pull away, but he held me fast, eyes locked on mine. He was enjoying my fear. I knew I had to escape. The opportunity came on Valentine's Day. He'd gone out for another surprise. I was alone, the silence amplifying my pounding heart. The handcuffs still bound me. I looked around the basement, searching for escape. A small window, too small. The door, heavy and locked. Despair washed over me. Was this it? My life now, trapped at his mercy? Then I saw it. A small rusty pipe along the wall, connected to the sink. It was loose. Maybe. I shuffled to the sink, handcuffs clinking. I grabbed the pipe, testing its strength. It was wobbly. With adrenaline, I pulled, twisting. It creaked, then snapped free. The sharp end was in my hand. I hesitated, mind racing. This was my chance, my only chance, but dangerous. If he came back, I couldn't think about it. I had to take the risk. I used the pipe to pick the lock on the handcuffs. Slow, painstaking. My hands shook, the metal slippery. Finally, a click, one cuff open. I quickly undid the other, wrists raw. I was free. I grabbed the pipe. I heard his car. He'd be here any minute. I crept to the door, heart pounding. He was close. Too close. I took a breath. The door handle turned. Mark stepped in, holding a heart-shaped box. He was smiling. He didn't see me. I stepped from the shadows, pipe raised. His smile faltered. I swung the pipe down, hitting him hard. He collapsed. I stood there, shaking. I had done it. I had escaped, but the fear, it would always be there. I ran. I didn't stop until the police station. I told them everything. They arrested him. He was found guilty. I tried to move on, but the memories haunted me. The basement, the handcuffs, the red rose, a permanent scar. I would never forget. I would never celebrate Valentine's Day again. He said it would be the perfect romantic getaway for Valentine's Day. The secluded cabin in the woods. It was anything but romantic. Emily and Ben had been together for 7 years. A lifetime, it seemed, considering how distant they'd become. The spark that had once ignited their relationship had dwindled to a flicker, threatened by the daily grind of life, demanding jobs, bills, and the slow creep of comfortable silence. Ben, ever the optimist, had suggested a Valentine's Day getaway, a chance to reconnect, to rekindle the flame. Emily, though hesitant, had agreed. A weekend in a secluded cabin in the woods, it sounded peaceful. The drive was long and arduous. Snow fell steadily, blanketing the landscape in a thick layer of white. The roads became increasingly narrow and winding, the GPS signal flickering in and out. As they ventured deeper into the woods, the silence was broken only by the crunch of tires on snow and the occasional snap of a tree branch. The cabin was even more isolated than Ben had described. A small, rustic structure nestled deep within a grove of towering pines. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney, the only sign of life. As they pulled up to the cabin, Emily felt a shiver, not just from the cold. There was something about the place, an unsettling quiet. The cabin was old and creaky, the wood paneling was dark and damp, and the air smelled of must and pine needles. The furniture was antique and uncomfortable, covered in thick, dusty fabric. A large stone fireplace dominated the living room, but the fire had died down to embers. Ben busied himself with building a new fire while Emily explored the rest of the cabin. There were 2 bedrooms upstairs, each with a small, drafty window. The bathroom was cramped and outdated, with a rusty shower and a leaky faucet. As Emily walked through the rooms, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the wind whistling through the trees outside. As night fell, the cabin became even more isolated. The snow continued to fall, muffling any sound from the outside world. The fire crackled in the fireplace, casting flickering shadows on the walls. Ben had cooked a simple dinner, but the atmosphere was strained. Old resentments, long buried, began to surface. They argued about work, about money, about the future. Their voices echoed through the cabin, amplified by the silence outside. Emily felt a growing sense of unease. It wasn't just the arguments. It was something else, something she couldn't quite explain. She kept hearing noises outside, the snap of twigs, the rustle of leaves. But when she looked out the window, she saw nothing but snow and trees. Later that night, as they lay in bed, the wind howled outside, rattling the windows. Emily couldn't sleep. She kept hearing noises, footsteps on the porch, a scratching sound at the door. She nudged Ben awake. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. He grumbled and rolled over. "It's just the wind," he said. But Emily wasn't convinced. She got out of bed and went to the window, peering out into the darkness. She saw something moving in the trees, a dark shape silhouetted against the snow. She gasped, her heart pounding. She couldn't make out what it was, but it was there, watching. She ran back to bed, pulling the covers over her head. She told Ben what she had seen, but he dismissed it as her imagination. He told her she was being paranoid, but Emily knew what she had seen. Something was out there, and it was coming closer. The next morning, the snow had stopped, but the temperature had dropped even further. The cabin was freezing. The fire had gone out during the night, and the cabin was filled with a damp, chilling cold. Ben went outside to chop wood, while Emily stayed inside, trying to warm herself by the dying embers. She felt a sense of dread. She knew something bad was going to happen. She could feel it in her bones. Then she heard a scream. It was Ben. She ran outside, her heart pounding in her chest. She found him lying in the snow, his face pale and contorted in fear. He was pointing towards the trees. "It's out there," he whispered. "It's watching us." Emily looked into the trees, her eyes searching the shadows, and then she saw it. A figure standing in the trees, its eyes glowing in the darkness. It was tall and gaunt, with long, spindly limbs. It was humanoid, but there was something else about it, something unnatural. It was like it was made of shadows, of darkness itself. It raised its hand, pointing a long, bony finger at them. And then it smiled, a smile that was full of malice and hunger. Emily screamed, grabbing Ben's hand. They turned and ran back to the cabin, the creature's chilling laughter echoing behind them. They barricaded the door, piling furniture against it. They huddled together in the living room, their breaths coming in ragged gasps. They knew they were trapped. The creature was outside, waiting. They could hear it moving around the cabin. its footsteps heavy on the porch. It was circling them like a predator stalking its prey. They waited, their fear growing with each passing moment. They knew it was only a matter of time before the creature found a way in. The cabin, their romantic getaway, had become their tomb. What does the creature want? Is it connected to their past? Will Emily and Ben survive the night? Let us know what you think in the comments. I'm not one of those girls who uses dating apps. Seriously, I'd always sworn them off. But loneliness has a way of creeping in, especially on days like Valentine's Day. Living alone in a city where no one asks you how you're doing, well, it can be heartbreaking. So a few days ago, I caved. I downloaded Hinge. I wasn't expecting fireworks, maybe just a few harmless chats. I definitely wasn't prepared for what happened. Then Mark showed up. His profile was low-key, which I liked. Normal photos. Him hiking at a bookstore, one with a goofy grin holding a dog. His bio was simple. Bookworm, coffee addict, enjoys exploring new places. No cheesy pickup lines, no shirtless selfies. I swiped right, and we matched instantly. We started talking, and surprisingly, the conversation flowed. We bonded over our love of old movies and indie music. It felt easy. It was his idea to have our first date on Valentine's Day. A little cliché, maybe, but I was kind of charmed. I hadn't had a real date in ages. We agreed to meet at a quiet speakeasy downtown. Mark even offered to pick me up. Looking back, that should have been my first red flag. If I'd known what was coming, I would have stayed home with a pizza and Netflix. Mark arrived right on time, which was a nice change from the guys I usually dated. He was wearing a dark peacoat and jeans. Casual, but put together. He wasn't movie star handsome, but his smile was warm, and there was something in his eyes, an intensity that I initially mistook for attraction. On the way to the bar, we made small talk. Traffic, the weather, the ridiculous Valentine's Day decorations everywhere. He mentioned he wasn't usually on Hinge, that I was his first match in months. Something about his tone felt off, like he was trying too hard, but I shrugged it off. First dates are awkward, right? The speakeasy was dimly lit and cozy. We ordered cocktails and found a quiet booth. At first, things were great. Mark was funny, engaging. He told me about his job as a web designer, his dream of traveling the world. But as the night went on, I started noticing some odd things. He'd sometimes zone out mid-sentence, like he'd completely forgotten what he was talking about. His voice would change too, becoming deeper, almost rougher. Then there was the way he answered my questions. It was like he was making things up as he went along, and the stories didn't always line up. He even referred to himself in the third person once, saying, "Mark's always been a loner," then laughed nervously. I tried to ignore the nagging feeling of unease. Maybe it was just nerves. When we left the bar, Mark offered to drive me home. Instead of taking the usual route, he turned down a dark, unfamiliar street. "Shortcut," he said, but my heart started pounding. The street was deserted, barely lit. "Where are we going?" I asked, my voice trembling. He didn't answer. We turned onto a dead-end road, surrounded by trees. Panic seized me. "Mark, I want to go home now." He turned to me, his smile gone, replaced by a chillingly blank expression. "Relax. We're just going to talk." "Talk about what?" I stammered. "About how you're going to be mine," he said, his voice cold. I tried the door, but it was locked. I saw something in the back seat, cable ties and duct tape. My blood ran cold. "Let me out," I screamed, pounding on the window. Mark grabbed my arm, his grip like iron. "Don't make this difficult," he growled. I fought him, kicking and screaming, but he was too strong. Suddenly, his face changed. The blankness was gone, replaced by confusion. I'm sorry," he stammered. "I don't know what came over me." He released my arm. He looked genuinely scared. "Run," he whispered. "Run while you still can." Before I could react, his face shifted again, the coldness returning. "Too late," he hissed. "You're not going anywhere." He lunged for me, and I screamed again, a raw, terrified sound. I managed to kick him in the groin, hard, and he doubled over in pain. I scrambled out of the car and ran into the darkness. The sound of his enraged shouts echoing behind me. I didn't stop running until I reached a gas station miles away. The police found Mark the next day. He was in a mental hospital. They said he had dissociative identity disorder. He had no memory of what he'd done. But I remember. I'll never forget the terror in his eyes, the chilling shifts in his personality. And I'll never use a dating app again. Some things are better left unknown. Hello guys, which story scared you the most? Let me know in the comments. And thanks for listening, everyone. If you stuck around until the end, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and click the notification bell so you never miss a new episode. As always, I'm looking for more story ideas, so drop a comment below with any themes or experiences you'd like to hear next. Stay safe out there, and until next time, keep your eyes open.